Good day, everyone. So, for this day, I will be discussing to you about the other model of intercultural competence. So, to start, let's first define what is an intercultural competence. After reviewing the definitions of intercultural competence, the scholars considered the following one as most relevant to their institution's internationalization strategies, which is they say that knowledge of others, knowledge of self, skills to interpret and relate, skills to discover and to interact, valuing others' values, beliefs and behaviors, and relativizing oneself is the meaning of intercultural competence. It is therefore the ability to communicate effectively and appropriately in intercultural situation based on one's intercultural knowledge, skills, and attitude. So, in building on the experts' understanding of intercultural communication and intercultural effectiveness, numerous scholars, for example, uh, the speech communication specialist, applied linguistics, interculturalist, international educators. Okay, they have devised models of intercultural competence. So let's take a look of some of the most widely known frameworks in intercultural competence. So first we have the Byram's 1997 model of intercultural communicative competence. And the next one we have Chen and Starosta's 2008 model of intercultural communication competence. Next, we have the M.J. Banney 1993 developmental model of intercultural or sensitivity. And the last one, we have the Dearduff's 2004 process model of intercultural competence. So first, let's go to Byram's model of intercultural communicative competence. So Byram 1997 model of intercultural communicative competence has had a profound impact on the teaching of this of second or a foreign language, especially in a European context. So his conceptual framework draws attention to the need to integrate culture into a second language teaching and learning. So, communicative competence refers to what a speaker needs to know and what a child needs to learn. So, to be able to use a language appropriately in a specific social or cultural settings. So, in the first part of Byram's model, so he cited that the following linguistic elements as characteristic of an interculturally competent second language speaker or the intercultural speaker or mediator. So, linguistic competence uh, is the first one. So, it's the ability to apply knowledge of the rules and standard version of the language to produce and interpret spoken and written language. The next one, we have the sociolinguistic competence. It is the ability to give to the language produced by an interlocutor, whether native speaker or not. So, meaning they are taken for granted by the interlocutor or are negotiated and made explicit with the interlocutor. So, the next one we have the discourse competence. So it's the ability to use, discover, and negotiate strategies for the production and interpretation of monologue or dialogue text which follow the conventions of the culture of an interlocutor or negotiated as intercultural text for particular purposes. So the second part of the framework is to identify the five savoir or components that linked to the cultural dimensions of the intercultural speaker's competence. So the first two are considered prerequisites for successful intercultural communication. So we have the intercultural attitudes, or it's the savoir-être, It's the curiosity and the openness, readiness to suspend disbelief about others' culture and beliefs, about one's own intercultural attitudes. The second is the knowledge or the savoir. It's the knowledge of social groups and their products and practices in one's own and in one's interlocutor's country. So finally, the next three components feature the skills deemed necessary for successful communication across cultures and linguistics. Languages. So we have the skills of interpreting and relating, or the savoir comprendre. It's the ability to interpret a document or event from another culture and to explain it and relate it to documents or events from one's own. The next one is we have the skills of discovery and interaction, or the savoir apprendre. It's the ability to acquire new knowledge of a culture and to operate this knowledge in real-time communication. So the next one, we have the critical cultural awareness, or the savoir singere. It's the ability to evaluate critically and on the basis of explicit criteria, perspectives, practices, and products in one's own and other cultures and countries. So this model draws attention to the need for language teachers to integrate a cultural component into their language teaching. So with this in view, Byram offered the following advice. So he stated that developing the intercultural dimensions in language teaching involves recognizing that the aims are to give learners intercultural competence as well as linguistic competence, to prepare them to interact for interaction with people of other cultures, and the next one is to enable them to understand and accept people from other cultures as individuals with other distinctive perspectives, values, and behaviors, and to help them to see that such interaction is an enriching experience. So, knowing grammar rules and vocabulary in a second language is not sufficient for one to be culturally competent. So, Byron's model of intercultural communicative competence raises awareness of the importance of culture learning for second language learners. For example, learning about the values and the practices of their own and other cultures. So next model we have Chen and Starosta's model of intercultural communication competence. So it says that speech communication specialist Chen and Starosta in 2008 have developed and refined their own model of intercultural communication competence, which emphasizes a transformational process of symmetrical interdependence. So their conceptual framework consists of three equally important interrelated dimensions that work together to create a holistic picture of intercultural communication competence. So first we have the affective or the intercultural sensitivity. The next one we have the cognitive or the intercultural awareness. And the third one we have the behavioral or intercultural adroitness. So this model does not, however, deal explicitly with intercultural interactions in a second language. So intercultural communication competence in Chen and Starosta's view requires affective or intercultural sensitivity, that is positive emotion, that enables individuals to be sensitive enough to acknowledge and respect cultural differences. So this affective process is linked to the following personal elements or characteristics. So we have the self-concept, open-mindedness, non-judgmental attitude, and social relaxation. So similar to Byram, 1997, these scholars have found that people who are Competent intercultural communicators possess higher level of cognitive or intercultural awareness, that is, self-awareness. For example, knowledge of one's own personal identities or culture. And we have cultural awareness. For instance, understanding of how culture differs. So, to be competent intercultural communicators, Chen and Starostas maintain that individuals must also enhance their behavioral or intercultural adroitness, or the message skills, the knowledge regarding appropriate self-disclosure, or behavioral flexibility, interaction, management, and the social skills. So these skills and actions, in their view, are vital for world citizens to act effectively in intercultural encounters and achieve the goal of multicultural interdependence and interconnectedness in the global village. So, recognizing the complex multicultural dynamics of our current global society, Chen and Starostas recommend that measures of intercultural communication competence take into account the multiple perspectives and identities that are now a common feature within communities and cultures. So the trends of technology development, globalization, and the economy, the widespread population migration, development of multiculturalism, and the demise of the nation state in favor of and supranational identification have shrunk and multiculturalized the world, and traditional perceptions of self and other must be redefined. So the global context of human communication and the need to pursue the state of multicultural coexistence require that we abolish the boundaries separating me and you, us and them, and develop the theory of communication competence that takes into account individuals' multiple identities. So, challenging a traditional notion of self and other, their recommendation is in line with the position of Moon 2008 and the other critical theorists, for example, Dervin 2012 and Holiday 22, who rally against homogenizing static perspective of culture that adopt a culture as a nation perspective and fail to acknowledge the dynamic nature of identities, hybridity within individuals, and diversity within groups. So, next we have the developmental model of intercultural sensitivity, or DMIS. So while some theorists have focused on describing the behaviors and traits associated with intercultural competence, others have proposed models that aim to depict the process of becoming interculturally competent. One such framework is the developmental model of intercultural sensitivity, or the DMIS. So the DMIS has had a significant impact on the field of intercultural communication and is widely used in research, for example, in education abroad and practice. Another example is intercultural education programs. So in relation to this model, so Benny and Benny 2004 view intercultural competence as the ability to communicate effectively in cross-cultural situations and to relate appropriately in a variety of cultural contexts. So while intercultural sensitivity refers to the developmental process that impacts on individuals' psychological ability to deal with cultural differences, phenomenological in nature, this theoretical framework has developed by Milton Benay in 1993 to explain the observed and reported experience of individuals in intercultural encounters. So the underlying assumption of the model is that as one's experiences of cultural differences becomes more sophisticated, one's competence in intercultural relations it increases. So the DMIS centers on the construct of ethnocentrism and ethno-relativism. It's by Bani, 2009. So ethnocentrism is the worldview of one's own culture in central to all reality. It's according to Bani, 1993, whereas the eternalism, like the being comfortable with many standards and customs, and to having an ability to adapt behavior and judgment a variety of interpersonal settings. So in this theory, intercultural sensitivity is associated with personal growth and development of an intercultural mind. So, a mindset capable of understanding from within and from without both one's own culture and other cultures. So, Betty suggests that the development of intercultural sensitivity occurs as the construct and experiences of cultural differences involved towards an increased awareness and acceptance of those differences. So, specifically, the DMIS theorizes that individuals move more ethnocentric as stages where one's culture is experienced as central to reality. For example, denial, defense, immunization, and through ethno-relative stages of greater recognition and acceptance of difference. So we have the acceptance, adaptation, and integration. So here, people, however, do not necessarily follow a linear progression. So for example, advancing to the next stage in sequence. So due to the unpleasant intercultural experiences or acute culture shock, for example, they may retreat at a lower level of sensitivity. So denial of difference measures a world view that ignores or simplifies cultural differences. So in this stage, one's own culture is experienced as the only real one. So that's polarization, or the defense or the reversal measures a judgmental orientation that views cultural differences in terms of us and them, whereby one's own culture or an adapted one. So is experienced as the best way of doing things in defense of difference, as is uncritically viewed as superior, whereas in reversal, the opposite bias prevails. So minimization or the M measures a transitional worldview that emphasizes cultural commonality and universal values with limited cultural self-awareness. So individuals in this phase are still ethnocentric and may not pay sufficient attention to cultural differences. So, assuming that other cultures are similar to one's own, so next we have the acceptance of difference, measures a world view that can comprehend and appreciate complex cultural differences. So, while adaptation to difference identifies the capacity to alter one's cultural perspective and adapt one's behavioral so that it is appropriate in a particular cultural context. So the DMIS posits the ethno-relative world view. So the acceptance and adaptation. So they have more potential to generate the attitudes, the knowledge, and behavior that constitute intercultural competence and facilitate adjustments in a new milieu. So in sum, the DMIS offers a theory-based explanation of individual effectiveness in intercultural encounters, capturing the elements that Bawak and Brislin, 1992, argue are the key predictors of success in intercultural context. So they say that to be effective in another culture, people must be interested in other cultures, be sensitive enough to notice cultural differences, and then also be willing to modify their behavior as an indication of respect for the people of other culture. So next, we have the process model of intercultural Competence. So, drawing on the input of 23 leading interculturalists, so Derrida, the author of the model, is international educator, also devised a process model. So her graphic representation of intercultural competence, which is presented here. So it draws attention to the internal shift in a frame of reference that is essential for effective and appropriate behavior in intercultural encounters. So, a strength of this process model is that it recognizes the ongoing complexity of the development of intercultural competence and the importance of reflection in the lifelong journey towards interculturality. So, uh, so interculturality as the set of process through which relations between different cultures are constructed, whereby the aim is to enable groups and individuals who belong to such cultures within a single society or geopolitical links or geopolitical identity to link based on the equity of mutual respect. So similar to Chen and Starostas and Byram's model, Derrida's conceptual framework accentuate the vital role that attitude plays intercultural learning. So significantly, the intercultural expert she surveyed stressed that the attitude of openness, respect, or valuing all cultures, also the curiosity and discovery, all tolerating ambiguity, are essential for one to become interculturally competent. That's Jordan 2004. So further, in accord with Byram's Savoie, her model recognizes their intercultural competence necessitates knowledge and understanding of one's own cultural norms and sensitivity to those of other cultures. So Derrida's process model identifies key internal outcomes that may occur as a result of an informed frame of reference shift. So, namely, adaptability or an ethno-relative perspective, empathy, and a flexible mindset. So, her graphic also specifies desired external outcomes that can be assessed, for example, by behaving and communicating appropriately and effectively in intercultural situations. So in Derrida's words, her model provides a holistic framework for intercultural competence development and assessment. So all of these models have contributed to our understanding of the multiple factors involved in intercultural competence and the process of gradually moving from one ethnocentric or monocultural perspective to an ethno-relative or intercultural mindset. Alright, so that's it. Thank you so much for listening.